My name is Kenneth. I'm 33 years old. I graduated from high school and joined my current company, where I've been an idle employee at a rural branch for 15 years. When I was in middle school, my father passed away. I wanted to start working after middle school, but my mother, crying, begged me, please at least graduate from high school. Although I wanted to ease my mother's burden by working early, I decided to honor her wishes and attended high school. We couldn't afford college, and I thought taking a student loan would delay my working years by 4. So I begged my mother to let me work right after high school. My mother, understanding my feelings, said, in this era, having just a high school diploma might make life tough, but Anne agreed. In high school, I worked part-time at a company run by my relatives. I had other part-time jobs too, but my relatives kindly employed me. I told my relatives I planned to work full-time after high school, so they taught me various professional manners. Though sometimes strict, I appreciated their guidance, knowing it was preparation for the real world. I am currently at a rural branch. I create internal newsletters and manage documents there. It's a so-called an idle position. Being assigned here means no chance of promotion. In fact, it's known that during layoffs, employees from this department are the first to be let go. Around me are people who cause trouble in other departments, have poor performance, or have frequent tardiness and absences. Essentially problem employees. I didn't cause any trouble myself. I just caught the eye of a certain boss. There was a college graduate, Amy, 1 year younger than me, who joined the company after me. When I was still at the main office, we worked in the same department. Back then, I was 24 and she was 23. Amy was a very cute woman. She was popular in the company. And there was Kent, 2 years older than me. He was an elite graduate from Harvard, a famous university. Amy also graduated from Harvard, making them senior and junior. Apparently, when Amy was a freshman, Kent was a senior, and they had dated once. Kent boasted about it. However, another Harvard graduate said Kent's intense advances couldn't be rejected by Amy, leading to a brief one-week relationship before Amy broke up with him. I was listening to all that talk with a hum. College graduates generally didn't care about those of us with just a high school diploma. There was a sense that they looked down on us. Being aware of this, I kept my distance from college graduates. However, I became Amy's mentor when she was a new hire. Though only 1 year older, I had 5 more years of work experience. It seemed fitting. People say I'm good at taking care of others. I tend to consider others' situations too much. When my father passed away, I also considered my mother's situation too much and offered to start working after middle school. I have a habit of prioritizing others over myself. Amy seemed to like this about me. She followed me around with a stool. It's common for newbies to follow their mentors around. So, I didn't think much of it. But one day, Kent called me out. Hey, Kenneth. Don't get cocky. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. So, I asked him honestly. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Apparently, my attitude irritated him. His face turned red as he said, I know you've been following Amy around. Amy? Who was that? I remembered there was one person. Are you talking about Amy? Yes. I heard you're using your position as her mentor to keep her close like your personal assistant. What? What was he talking about? I was dumbfounded. If she was following me around, that made sense. But me following her? How could anyone see it that way? And we only talk about work 99% of the time. The other 1% is just I'm hungry or what's the weather like tomorrow. Only talking about work would be awkward. It's a completely professional relationship. We only talk about work, I said. Don't lie. You're abusing your position. I'm going to report you to HR for misconduct. Go ahead. I believe Amy will clear my name during the investigation. I said. I truly believe that. A few days later, there was indeed an inquiry from HR, conducted by Henry. Both Amy and I answered normally. She said, this seems strange. Are they questioning all new hires, while tilting her head? I had an idea but said, who knows, and tilted my head along with her. After a while, Henry called me directly on the internal line. Kenneth, there's a report that you told Amy not to say anything that would be detrimental to you during the inquiry. What? I was shocked. I never said anything like that to Amy. There must be a mistake, I said. We received a tip, he replied. Who said that? It's not true at all. I can't reveal the source. So, HR will have someone monitor you. Your boss has also been told to keep an eye on you. Okay. I hung up. I hadn't done anything wrong. So I should just continue as usual. But the thought of being watched made me uneasy. Not just that. Knowing my boss would be watching me with suspicion was unsettling. I had worked so hard for the company. It was frustrating, but I couldn't think of a way to prove my innocence. A few days later, Henry called me again. Kenneth, we're removing you from your position as Amy's mentor. Excuse me? I was shocked. It was too sudden. Why? We received information from your boss that you're using your position to manipulate Amy. What? My boss. Was it Curtis, the division manager, or Sage, the section manager? Or perhaps I had one person in mind. Was it Mark? Mark, the supervisor, was drinking buddies with Kent. They were peers and Mark became a supervisor right after Kent, who was the fastest to get promoted. They were close. Maybe they were colluding behind the scenes. I can't say who. But expect a formal notification from your boss. Okay. And if this happens again, there will be consequences. Understood? Understood. Amy, beside me, looked puzzled. She couldn't possibly imagine that I was being reprimanded by HR for supposedly abusing my power over her. My mind went blank. Then Sage called out to me. As you probably heard from HR, we're removing you from your position as Amy's mentor. If anything like this happens again, I won't be able to protect you. What? Amy, beside me, looked surprised. Amy, I'm sorry for not keeping a closer eye on things. What do you mean? Amy, come with me. I'll be your mentor from now on. What? Mark grabbed Amy's hand as she stood confused. Seeing this, I realized it was indeed Kent and Mark who leaked the false information. I was forbidden from any interaction with Amy and was transferred to another department the next month. Several months passed. After work, Amy called me to meet at the emergency stairs. I didn't go. I continued working late and returned to the locker room around 8 p.m. 2 hours has passed after the end of work at 6 p.m. I didn't expect Amy to still be there. Amy. She was there. In the cold, her ears, cheeks, and fingers were red. She turned around at my voice. And she said happily, Kenneth. I couldn't help but run to her. I handed her a can of coffee I had bought for myself. Here, hold this. It's warm. Amy smiled, holding the can with both hands. I'm glad you came. She did nothing wrong. Thinking that made my chest hurt. She was forbidden from talking to me without understanding why and called me out to find out the reason. I decided not to meet her because I didn't want to cause her more trouble or be falsely accused of anything else. I thought if I didn't show up at the agreed time, she would give up and go home. But she waited for me the whole time. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologized repeatedly, biting my lip. Why do we have to go through this? We didn't do anything wrong. Amy, if someone sees us, it'll be bad. Let's part ways and go home. Why? Why are we in this situation? I don't know, but someone. At that moment. What are you doing there? Henry spotted us and raised his voice. I heard voices, so I came to check. What are you doing on the emergency stairs? You are. Henry looked at me. Aren't you Kenneth from the blacklist? I was on the blacklist? It was over. Honestly, I couldn't think straight. Henry's outburst drew the attention of other HR staff working overtime nearby. From there, it was a blur. The story became that I was trying to do something to Amy on the emergency stairs. That incident led to my transfer to a rural branch the following week. Amy was given a few weeks off until I was transferred, so we didn't see each other again. I didn't know her personal contact details, and she didn't know mine. We were separated without being able to do anything. 9 years passed since then. I've been working as an idle employee at the rural branch ever since. At first, I thought I'd quit such an unfair company. But as a high school graduate, finding a better job was nearly impossible. I couldn't stop sending money to my mother, so I continued working at this company, numbing my feelings. Before I knew it, 9 years had passed. My current rural department is free from toxic atmosphere, quotas, or long overtime hours, and is very peaceful. It's calm and warm. Everyone works at their own pace and is relaxed. That's the kind of workplace it is. At first, I thought, as rumored, that the employees here were all problem children. I assumed they couldn't do their jobs well. But as I worked, I started noticing, moments. The people in this department weren't particularly incompetent or had bad behavior. Curious, I subtly asked around. I found out most were transferred here due to false accusations. They were framed by bosses or colleagues, labeled as problematic, and sent to this department. I always excelled at tedious tasks, so creating internal newsletters and organizing documents suited me. I kept working diligently at my own pace. But I was relegated to this static job as a high school graduate. Moreover, with the false reputation of having a bad character, no woman would be interested in me. So, I've been living in the countryside, working hard without a girlfriend all this time. Before I turned 30, I was anxious about my marriage since many of my old classmates got married. But after turning 30, I started feeling that it was okay to stay single. Marriage shouldn't be forced. One day, the document organization section manager, Tyler, approached me. "Kenneth, how are you today? An elite manager from the main office is coming this Friday. She's a relative of the chairman and apparently a top-notch woman in the company. So, I need you to prepare the materials for her. Can you do that?" "What? By Friday?" That's practically just 2 days. It was Tuesday afternoon. After finishing today's work, I'd only have Wednesday and Thursday. Could I manage that? "Yeah, I know. But we just got the notice from the head office. It's a bit of a harassment, thinking we're just a static department. But let's create some amazing materials and show them what we can do." "Ha ha. I understand. So, can I work overtime starting today?" "Oh, no, that's not possible. We don't have the budget for overtime." That's what payroll told us. They think an idle department like ours doesn't need overtime. Tyler said in his laid-back manner and then left, saying, "Good luck." I planned to finish my daily tasks within work hours and work on the materials after hours. But overtime was prohibited. What was I supposed to do? At that moment, I heard the conversation. "I'll handle your current tasks, so focus on preparing the materials for Friday. I'll take care of this work. You can count on me." "What? But I feel bad." As I hesitated, my seniors, Noah and Jason, smiled and patted me on the back. "Don't worry. You have the important task of creating impressive materials for the inspection. Leave the rest to us." Encouraged by their kindness, I worked frantically on the materials. I used all the limited time and created what I believed to be the best possible materials. On Thursday before the end of the day, I submitted them to Tyler. Amazing. To produce such materials in such a short time. Tyler, impressed, said with a voice filled with admiration. Then he smiled at me. "Thank you, Kenneth." No, it was thanks to the support and cooperation of everyone around me. It's all because of them. Don't be so modest. It's the truth. But was this material good enough? I was anxious. Tyler, my colleagues, and my seniors were impressed. But I had been away from the main office for a long time. In the main office, this might be considered low-level work. Everyone in this branch had been far removed from the intense, high-level environment of the main office. So, I worried that our standards had dropped significantly. I was very anxious. But I couldn't do any better. If this wasn't good enough, there was nothing more I could do. I braced myself and waited for the next day. However, I had no idea what would happen with this material. Friday arrived. The elite manager from the main office came. Her name was Karen. She was a year younger than me. A college graduate a year younger than me. It stung a little. She must have been a classmate of Amy. She was very beautiful. Amy had a cute look, but Karen was an elegant, cool beauty. Her intelligence showed in everything she did. I was about to hand over the materials to such a person. And accompanying her was Kent. He was now an assistant manager. When Kent saw me, he gave a triumphant smirk. Are the materials ready? Although Tyler was supposed to be higher in rank, Kent spoke to him condescendingly. Tyler accepted this. Well, Kenneth. Tyler said to me, looking nervous. I quietly said yes and handed the materials to Karen. She slightly smiled and said, thank you. Then she began reviewing the materials on the spot. She read them silently, and after a while, she turned to Tyler with a stern expression. Tyler, who made these materials? Tyler, whose name was called, stiffened visibly. Yes, this was made by Kenneth here. What? You made this? Yes, I did. I nodded. Karen looked puzzled, comparing me with the materials. Karen, my apologies for the inconvenience. Forget about this lowly employee and let's move on, Kent said, giving me a contemptuous look. And a sneer. Karen, with a somewhat dazed expression, moved on to the next department. It was a small branch, so as I went about my regular duties, I kept encountering Karen and Kent. Each time, Karen gave me a curious look. Eventually, Karen settled in our department, sitting in a conference room. As I was working quietly, Tyler called me. Kenneth, Karen wants to see you. Called out, I headed to the conference room. There, Karen sat with Kent sitting one seat apart from her. I'm Kenneth. I said. Please sit, Karen told me, indicating the seat opposite her. Why are you in such a rural place? What is your position? I'm a regular employee. I can't believe it. Karen looked incredulous. I was surprised by her reaction. I've never seen such excellent materials. With all due respect, Karen, there are plenty of people in our company who can produce this level of materials. Kent laughed as he said this. Kent, did you really read these materials? Huh? Of course. Kent's eyes darted nervously. Then you should know, right? The sources cited in these materials. Or do you not know? The sources cited in these materials are from a recent scientific journal, right? And it's from UK, which is a newly released one. It's very niche. Circulated only among specialists. I had always been interested in the field, so I decided to immerse myself in it. You say that easily, but the new research in this field, the important studies that only experts understand, they're filled with technical jargon. This is from a scientific journal. Only someone with a deep understanding could decipher this. Who exactly are you? I was at a loss. Who was I, indeed? As I hesitated, Karen added. And it's not just science. This part here. This is at the level of an international lawyer. You need knowledge of law and the ability to interpret scientific papers. It's impossible without both. I have obtained qualifications as an international lawyer. I answered honestly. I couldn't meet Karen's eyes. Her intense beauty was overwhelming. What? Kent shouted in disbelief. I had no choice but to continue. After being assigned to this department, I realized I had a lot of free time. So, I decided to go to university. There's a well-performing international university here, the university. Its law faculty is the only one that prepares for the international lawyer exam. So, I studied there. You mean you worked full-time and attended university to get an international lawyer qualification? Karen held her head in her hands and shook it from side to side. You have such vast knowledge. Where did you get this scientific knowledge? It came naturally from studying various past cases. I can't believe such an amazing person is just a regular employee. Kenneth, would you like to return to the main office? Karen. Bringing someone like him to the main office would tarnish its prestige. You didn't understand Kenneth's materials at all. If I had to choose between the two of you, I'd definitely choose Kenneth. Kent was taken aback by her words. Thank you for the offer, but as you can see, I've spent 9 years away from the main office environment. I might be more of a hindrance if I returned. What are you talking about? You're far more suited to a managerial position than I am. After a few rounds of back and forth, I finally gave in to her determination. I would return to the main office after 9 years. I felt like Rip Van Winkle. As I left the conference room, my colleagues and seniors, who had overheard the conversation, congratulated me. I was really fortunate to have such great companions. I almost cried. I would return to the main office on Monday. I felt my legs tremble as I headed to work. I could see the emergency stairs from that time, where I was found talking to Amy. My heart ached. I wondered what had happened to Amy. All employees could access the organizational chart, so I could check. I occasionally looked to see where Amy was. She was now 32. It wouldn't be surprising if she were married. But her last name hadn't changed. Some people keep their maiden names after marriage. Given how cute she was probably married. Or she had found someone great. What was I thinking? I stopped myself. Right. Amy and I didn't have anything between us. Nothing at all. Kenneth. A voice called from behind. On my way to the entrance, I realized who it was before I turned around. I slowly turned. In front of me stood Amy, whom I hadn't seen in 9 years. She had become much more mature. But she still had the same delicate charm. She started crying in front of me. I hurried over to her and handed her a handkerchief. I didn't want to get into trouble on my first day back by making a woman cry in such a public place. What should I do? Kenneth, it's really you. Amy smiled through her tears. I couldn't help but smile too. We agreed to meet after work. I wasn't afraid of Kent anymore. I had been called back to the main office as a manager. I could stand up to Kent's harassment with my new position. After 6 p.m., we met at the agreed place. Seeing her waiting in the cold reminded me of 9 years ago. I pretended to hold a can of coffee as I approached her. Here, warm up with this. I extended my hand as if I were holding a can of coffee. To my surprise, she took my hand. Your hand is warm, Kenneth. We held hands and walked to the restaurant area. We talked about the truth behind the incident 9 years ago and what had happened in our lives since then. Amy told me she had always liked me. I think I fell for you while you were mentoring me. I caused you so much trouble because of it. I'm really sorry for everything that happened because of me. Amy suddenly stopped and apologized deeply while looking down. It wasn't your fault. Please, lift your head, I said gently. She cautiously looked up. Did you carry that guilt for 9 years? Maybe that's why she was still single. She hadn't dated anyone in those 9 years. Then, please forget about it. Be free. Okay? I'm sorry for these 9 years. No, it's not that. I haven't dated anyone in these 9 years because, Amy fidgeted. Kenneth, I love. Before she could finish, I spoke. I love you, Amy. Amy's eyes widened. Tears streamed down her face. Me too. That's how Amy and I became a couple. In those 9 years, I had many experiences. But each one shaped who I am today. At first glance, some events might seem unlucky. But looking back, they might have been good turning points. Perhaps, turning misfortunes into allies makes one stronger. With such thoughts, I went to sleep that night. Amy now holds a supervisory position at the main office. Moreover, Amy. About these materials. Yes, Kenneth. Amy and I are working in the same department again. Most of the HR people from back then are no longer in the department. So, a reinvestigation of past incidents was conducted. Amy and I were interviewed. With the help of many people, I was finally proven innocent regarding the past incident. Amy had grown into a very dependable supervisor over those 9 years. We've kept our relationship a secret at work. Even though we're not at an age where we need to hide it, it just feels right. When we're alone, we talk. I never thought I'd get to work under you again, Kenneth. Me neither, Amy. I thought I'd be stuck at that branch until retirement. But the people at the branch were nice too, right? Yeah, they were. After my case was proven to be a wrongful accusation, I strongly requested re-investigations for the others at the branch. It turned out that most of them had been falsely accused as well. Due to HR's mistakes, those sent to the branch were offered suitable positions, but most declined. They said they preferred the relaxed work at the branch. The numerous wrongful accusations prompted a quick overhaul of the system. In that process, I was promoted to department head. 2 months after becoming department head, I proposed to Amy. She tearfully accepted. Anne, Isabella, John. When I called out, I heard voices from upstairs saying yes. Amy and I got married, and our daughter Isabella was born the following year. 2 years later, our son John was born. Now, the 4 of us live happily together. We bought a house with a garden, and both of us still work at the same company. We make sure to go somewhere every weekend. Kids grow up fast. They keep getting bigger and bigger. This moment only happens now. I've come to cherish the present moment. The seemingly secluded life at the rural branch now feels like a distant memory. I never thought I would get married. Apparently, my mother didn't think so either. Having lost her husband young, I bought my mother an apartment near our house. It's a 2-bedroom place. I worried that being too close might make Amy feel suffocated, but my mother and Amy get along very well. Now, they are like real mother and daughter. I'm really glad I was able to let my mother hold her grandchildren. Life is truly unpredictable. Karen, who gave me a turning point, is now working hard as a department head. I also want to work hard for my precious family and cherish the time spent with them on weekends. Somebody, please help me. I heard a young girl screaming. Looking for the source of the sound, I saw a high school girl being dragged away by a man. I forgot all about rushing to work and rescued the girl, but of course, I ended up being late. What the hell is this? Coming to work late and dressed like that? My boss scolded me. The next day, I was demoted and transferred. However, I stood my ground and said, no need for that. I'm quitting this job today. What? My name is Alex. Ever since birth, my skin was pale and my hair was pitch black and thick. The nurses used to say, he looks just like a doll. As I grew older, I had big eyes and long eyelashes, often being mistaken for a girl. Plus, having the name Alex led to me being called Alexa. I couldn't stand it. I despised being called girly or effeminate by everyone around me, even though it wasn't my choice. Being judged by appearances alone would likely continue as I grew up. So, I decided I needed to change from the inside and started working out. There was a character who mastered karate in a cartoon I liked at the time. And I admired him so much that I started learning karate as soon as I entered elementary school. I was drawn to the real fight aspect of karate. Naturally, I chose karate. At first, I happily went to the dojo, but the training was tougher than I expected, and I almost gave up many times. Bruises on my hands and feet were a daily occurrence, and I had no time to play. However, my father told me, a man sees things through to the end once he starts, and I wasn't allowed to quit until I got my black belt. By the time I hit puberty, I think I had become pretty strong. But my body was still slim, so I often got picked on by local bullies. Despite my delicate appearance, I was known as the weirdo who went to a karate dojo. Of course, beating untrained bullies using the techniques I learned was easy. Still, my father and Mr. Jenkins, my karate teacher, both told me never to use karate for fighting, so I never struck first. However, there was one time in high school when I used karate. It was after school when I was hanging out at the mall with my friends, Tom and Jake. We were having fun walking around the mall when we heard what sounded like a girl screaming. It wasn't a happy scream, it was clearly a cry for help. I looked around and saw a young girl, about elementary school age, being dragged away by a man. Tom and Jake were panicking, wondering whether to call the police or get a security guard. I'll handle the guy. You guys call the cops. I told Jake as I approached the man and the girl. Tom, who was good at studying, came along with me. Hey, man. That girl clearly doesn't want to go with you. Let her go. Mind your own business. No way. I can't ignore a kid who's that scared. While Tom was talking to the man, I made eye contact with the girl. I mouthed, "I'll save you soon," and she, on the verge of tears, mouthed back, "Help me." I nodded and gave Tom a signal. "So, are you really her father?" "Of course I am." "How rude." "Hey, little girl, is this guy really your father?" Ignoring the man's response, I asked the girl. She shook her head vigorously and yelled, "No. He's a stranger. Help me." The man clicked his tongue at me as I got into a fighting stance, saying, "What a hassle you guys are." He then grabbed a pen from a nearby display and threatened the girl, "You know what'll happen if you move, right? Hey, get a security guard." The customers in the shopping mall started panicking. I stepped in front of Tom and struck before the man could react. My punch landed on his arm, making him drop the pen and release the girl. "Run!" The girl immediately ran to a nearby employee for safety. Meanwhile, I executed a spinning kick that hit the man, keeping my leg extended and drawing a circle from the outside in. With the man on the ground, I pinned him down just as Jake returned with the security guard. Seeing the commotion, the customers started applauding as I restrained the man. "Awesome, man. Well done." Despite the chaos, I was just glad the girl was safe. As the security guard took the man away, the situation calmed down, and the girl was already waiting in the security office. "Thank you for saving me. Are you hurt? Don't wander off alone anymore, okay?" Tom and Jake smiled at the girl as she introduced herself. "My name is Emily Blackwood." "Thank you so much." We were asked to stay until her parents arrived, but we had other things to do, so we left. Even after that incident, I was constantly covered in bruises. Dealing with bullies left marks, and although I never started fights, I got injured defending myself. Especially from those trying to catch me off guard. My mother worried, but my father said, "It's proof you're training hard at the dojo." Yeah, lately, I find karate really fun. Scrapes are a badge of honor for a man. You need to get stronger now to protect your loved ones in the future. He proudly believed my injuries were from karate practice. Since that day, I became capable of defending myself, and the bullies gradually started avoiding me. My father got suspicious when I stopped coming home with injuries, but I just told him, "I've gotten better at karate, keeping my fights a secret." I always wanted to become a police officer or a martial artist. However, lacking the necessary skills, I ended up working for a regular company, far removed from karate. I applied for a sales job, thinking my karate training would give me confidence and stamina. But I soon regretted it. I couldn't stand sitting at a desk, and I quickly got bored during the training phase. Without interest, I couldn't learn the job well, and my skills never improved. Noticing this, my boss, Ryan, seemed to have given up on me and tended to skip my training. Whenever I asked questions, he'd wave me off, saying, "Figure it out yourself." It was a terrible attitude for a boss, but it was true I lacked skills, so I kept asking other senior colleagues for help. Then came the opportunity to attend a practical training session with one of Ryan's clients. I was just there for support, but the client seemed to like me a lot. They were so impressed with my appearance that the deal was quickly closed. I don't see what's so great about your girly looks," Ryan sneered at first. But after seeing the client frequently praising me, he grinned as if he had an idea. "Ha, well, it seems you might be useful after all." "What?" Ryan, pleased with the outcome, insisted I accompany him to future meetings. My appearance often helped close deals, boosting Ryan's sales performance. Some clients even requested me as their sales representative, but Ryan would always say, "You're still inexperienced, or you're just eye candy. So just stand by my side and smile," taking credit for my work. "Ryan, this is my deal. It's unfair. If you're upset, prove yourself with your skills. You're just a rookie who doesn't know the first thing about sales." Ryan shouted at me in response to my rebuttal. It's true that I don't have the skills right now, so I couldn't argue back. But I wanted to vent my frustration somewhere, so I ended up unloading everything on my parents. I was upset and wanted someone to sympathize with me. While my mother sympathized, my father didn't. He's right. You lack the knowledge and experience, so you have to work several times harder to catch up. His harsh words made me bite my lip in frustration. However, my father's teachings always had a point. I had learned this since I was a child, so I decided to give it my all. Though I hadn't wanted to admit it, it was true that my appearance had played a role in closing those deals. So, I worked hard on things I wasn't good at. Wanting to be recognized for my pure skills, I started wearing glasses to obscure my face a bit, making sure people wouldn't focus on my looks. I diligently studied sales, asking many senior colleagues to teach me the basics all over again. Thanks to these efforts, my skills were gradually acknowledged, and within 3 years, I was promoted to a team leader with 2 to 3 direct subordinates. Considering the average pace, it was quite a rapid rise. Getting all full of yourself. All you've got going for you is your looks. Despite my promotion, Ryan continued to dump loads of menial tasks on me and repeatedly harassed me. But by this time, I had improved enough to handle his attacks with ease, calmly completing all tasks assigned to me. One day, I was told that, due to the client's request, I would be in charge of an important deal that could determine the company's fate. I was to lead, with Ryan as my support, though he was obviously unhappy with this arrangement. However, since the client was our biggest partner, there was no way to overturn their decision. Then, on the evening before the deal, Ryan suddenly told me to revise the materials. What? Why now? I was naturally confused by the sudden demand. Ryan smirked and said, "The meeting's first thing tomorrow morning. Make sure you finish it in time." With that, he left without offering any help. Seriously? No help at all? In the end, I worked until midnight, exhausted, and finally went home. As soon as I got home, I collapsed on my bed and fell asleep. The next morning, I overslept. Oh no! I jumped up, quickly got ready, and headed to the office without breakfast. On the way, I came across a scene I couldn't ignore. No! I saw a suspicious man dragging a high school girl into a narrow alley. I was in a hurry and almost ignored it, heading to work. But when I heard her scream, "Help! Somebody," my body moved on its own. I rushed over, grabbed the man's arm, and pulled him away from the struggling girl. Ignoring the man's menacing glare, I twisted his arm and swept his legs out from under him, making him fall to the ground in pain. Run! While restraining the man, I urged the girl to escape. But she was so scared she couldn't move, trembling uncontrollably. Seeing her shaking, I sighed and said, "This is such a hassle. Stay back," as I moved her out of the alley and stood between her and the man. The man, enraged, came at me, but I aimed for his face and performed a spinning heel kick, knocking him out with one blow. The girl was stunned by my moves. But I tied the unconscious man's hands with my tie and secured him to a street sign post before collapsing to the ground. After ensuring the man couldn't escape, I explained the situation to the gathering bystanders and asked them to call the police. I calmed the still shaking girl and, when the police arrived, I said, "She is still scared, so please delay questioning her. Also, make sure a female officer handles it." After giving them my contact information, I decided to walk her to the nearest station. Once she was safely at the station, I checked my watch and turned pale. Damn! I'm completely late, I muttered under my breath. Hearing this, she looked like she was about to cry. "I'm sorry." "It's my fault, isn't it?" she said. "No, it's not your fault," I reassured her. "Yes, it is. Please, take me to your workplace. I'll apologize with you." She pleaded desperately. I shook my head. "No, you need to go to school. If I walk around with a high school girl in uniform, I'll get in trouble before we even reach my office." I smiled wryly and tried to leave. But she grabbed my arm and insisted. "Wait. At least let me thank you." Her determination left me at a loss, and since I didn't have much time, I quickly wrote my phone number on the back of my business card and handed it to her. "Call this number in the evening, okay?" She looked relieved, nodded, and waved as she disappeared into the station. I quickly called Ryan. "I'm heading directly to the client," I told him. By the time I arrived at the company, the scheduled time had long passed. Naturally, Ryan was waiting with a furious look on his face. Having run at full speed, I was drenched in sweat, my hair was disheveled, and I wasn't even wearing a tie. "You're late. And what's with that look? Are you kidding me? He yelled. I'm sorry. Forget it. Go home now. Don't even bother coming back to the office today. You're a nuisance. Ryan was furious, and I couldn't even make excuses. I just handed over the materials I had prepared and said, I'm very sorry, before heading home for the day. The situation escalated that evening. Because of you, we lost a $5 million deal. How are you going to fix this? You're in big trouble. Be ready for tomorrow. Ryan screamed over the phone. This is it. I'm done, I muttered, letting out a deep sigh. Just then, a call came from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered, and it was the high school girl I had helped that morning. I remembered I had told her I'd be available in the evening. Hi, it's me, the high school girl you helped this morning, she said. Oh, from today, I replied. How did things go at work after that? She asked. I hesitated to answer. Well, not so great. After persistent questioning, I ended up telling her about Ryan. I couldn't believe I was venting to a stranger, let alone a high school girl. I must have been really stressed out. What a pathetic story. It's my fault you're in such a mess. Can you meet me now? I want to hear more, she pressed. I was bewildered. No, I can't really. No. I can't accept that, she insisted. But talking to you won't help. If you don't talk to me, I'll go to your company myself. Seeing her determination, I reluctantly agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. When I arrived after changing, I found not only her but also an older man in a high-end suit. I tensed up immediately. Even just standing there, the man had an intimidating aura, and it was clear he was no ordinary person. Hey, she called out to me. Are you Alex? Yes, I am. I am Henry Blackwood, this girl's grandfather. Thank you very much for saving my granddaughter. No, I only did what anyone would do. His polite gratitude made me feel embarrassed. And this is the second time you've saved her. I can't thank you enough. What? The second time. I tilted my head in thought. I didn't think I had rescued people that often. Hey. It's me, Emily. Emily Blackwood. Don't you remember? Emily interrupted, stepping between Henry and me. Emily? Oh. Emily Blackwood from 8 years ago? The girl at the shopping center? Yes. You saved me back then too. All the adults were just passing by. Her words brought back memories from 8 years ago. I couldn't hide my surprise at this coincidence or twist of fate. Well, please have a seat. Would you like some coffee? Yes, thank you. Standing around in a cafe would attract attention. So I sat down as Henry suggested. Emily has often been targeted by bad adults due to family circumstances. She's been through multiple kidnapping attempts since she was little. Henry's serious tone made me shudder. To be honest, I'm the head of the Blackwood group. People see my granddaughter as an easy target to make me comply with their demands. I remembered that the Blackwood group was one of the wealthiest families in the country. I had envied rich families, but hearing this made me realize they have their own struggles. She's been through a lot because of it. Grandpa, I'm okay, Emily said reassuringly. You're such a good girl, Emily. Henry's expression was gentle as he patted Emily's head. Then he turned to me with a serious look. Alex, I heard you faced trouble because of my granddaughter. Please accept this as an apology. He took out a thick envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. I could easily guess what was inside, having seen such scenes on TV. I was startled. No, I can't accept this. As I refused, Henry looked at Emily. This is troubling. What should we do, Emily? Emily whispered something in his ear. And then smiled at me. I've been looking for you all this time, she said. Ah, I have a proposal for you. Henry made a surprising proposal. Though it confused me, Emily pleaded, now, I want to help you, and I hesitantly agreed. The next morning, when I arrived at the office, Ryan eagerly called me to the conference room. Before I could even say good morning, he spoke. Hey, Alex. Remember what I told you yesterday? Yes. Good. Listen up. You're being demoted and you will be transferred to the Florida branch. For some reason, Ryan laughed as he said this. Oh, and by Florida, I mean a remote island. So basically, you're being demoted. Well, at least you're not fired, thanks to me. Despite his condescending tone, I replied without changing my expression. No need. I'm quitting today, I said. Then I handed in my prepared resignation letter. What? Are you sure? You'll regret it, Ryan sneered. I won't. You think a guy like you, with only his looks, will find another job? You'll just end up a recluse. Ha, what a joke. He mocked me contemptuously. Just then, our president, Mr. Johnson, rushed into the sales department, looking flustered. Ah, Mr. Johnson. I was just telling this fool about his demotion. What? What did you say? Seeing Mr. Johnson's pale face, I watched as he turned to Ryan and shouted. What are you doing? It's not Alex who's getting demoted. It's you, Ryan. What? At that mother end, Henry walked in. Who? Who are you? Ryan stammered. This is Henry Blackwood, the head of the Blackwood Group, Mr. Johnson introduced. What? The client from yesterday's deal was a subsidiary of a company owned by the Blackwood Group. After hearing from Emily, Henry immediately contacted the client and offered to continue the contract on the condition that Ryan was demoted and I was recruited. Mr. Johnson accepted Henry's offer. Ryan, you're the one being transferred to the Florida branch and demoted, Mr. Johnson declared. This is outrageous. Ryan protested. But his misdeeds had already been reported to Mr. Johnson, leaving Ryan with no way out. Though he initially accepted the demotion, Ryan didn't want to be sent to a remote area. He resigned before the transfer process began, while still holding the title of department head. Unable to find a new job, Ryan ended up working part-time at a convenience store, where some former colleagues saw him. Rumors spread, and colleagues visited the store to mock him, causing him to eventually move away. Meanwhile, I was offered a position at a company under the Blackwood Group and was invited to live with the Blackwood family for training. When Henry and Emily personally visited my parents to greet them, they were astonished. Your son has saved my granddaughter twice, Henry said. My mother smiled proudly, and my father nodded with pride. He has the potential to become an even greater man. Please allow me to take him under my wing, Henry requested. My father said respectfully. This is an incredible offer. Please take care of my son. With that, they gladly sent me off. Emily was excited, saying, we can live under the same roof from today, but I was still bewildered. This was because Henry's proposal included me becoming Emily's potential husband. I tried to use the age difference as an excuse, but Emily wouldn't budge. I don't care about that. I have been determined to marry you since the first time you saved me, she insisted. From back then? You were just a child, I said. First love knows no age. Besides, the age difference is only 8 years. That's nothing for celebrities, Emily argued. Henry also pushed strongly, saying, Emily's partner needs to be strong. Alex is perfect with his skills and experience. My parents quickly approved, leaving no room for opposition, making our relationship official. I couldn't keep up with the rapid developments, but I decided to set a boundary. At least wait until you graduate high school before we date, I said. Okay. As Emily gave a cheerful reply and hugged my arm, I thought to myself, I'm glad I took up karate. And I was grateful to my father for encouraging me to continue.
I'm Mason. As I work now, I think to myself. I ponder how truly happy it is to see a family together, all smiles. I was raised by a single mother. It was just the two of us. I've heard that my parents divorced when I was 1 year old. My mother worked while leaving me at daycare, but once I started elementary school, she began working from morning until late at night. I can understand now that we were quite poor back then. For breakfast, it was usually cereal, snack bread until Mom came home, and at night, we often had a pasta with tomato sauce. The occasional fried egg that came with it was a treat. Meats like steak were really occasional, but every meal my mother cooked was delicious. Even though she would come home late, around 10 p.m., I was always home alone until then. It's unthinkable now, but that was just the everyday norm back then. I still remember my mom's apologetic face saying, "I'm sorry we can't be together more." I always played alone. I was going back and forth between the parking lot of my apartment building, the grassy area next to it, and a small park a little further down the street. My clothes were a worn-out t-shirt. Maybe because I looked timid and was quiet, I didn't make friends. But I think it was good that I didn't have any friends. I couldn't have played like everyone else. After school, everyone would often gather at the local candy store, buy snacks and drinks, and then eat them at the park. I had no allowance to buy such things. I could not have joined a group anyway. There were times I felt lonely. But as a child, I understood it was just the way things were. Being alone was normal for me, but as I got a bit older in elementary school, my world expanded, and I had a special encounter. Walking down one of the back alleys from my house, I saw a dog with a beaming smile in the yard of a house, wagging its tail at me. How cute! I muttered to myself, stopping in my tracks. As I kept watching, the dog wagged its tail even more and started barking excitedly. Then, I noticed a lady, about my mom's age, sitting nearby, whom I hadn't seen before. When she noticed me standing there, she asked, "Oh, who do we have here?" I was surprised to see someone there and found myself at a loss for words. Then the lady said, "It seems Buddy is happy to see you. Want to come over?" Wanting to get closer to the dog, I nodded yes. The lady then said, "Come on in. Buddy is gentle. He won't bite. He loves being petted," she told me with a smile as I cautiously approached the dog. I tentatively reached out to pet the dog. As I did, the dog sat down, wagging its tail, and seemed delighted to be petted. Then the dog sat down, wagging its tail excitedly as I petted it. From that day on, I started visiting Buddy. On days when the lady wasn't gardening, I somehow felt I shouldn't go into the yard, so I just waved at Buddy and went back. Buddy always barked happily when he saw me, letting me pet him as much as I wanted. I loved that gentle Buddy. "You're kind to animals, aren't you? Buddy always looks so happy when you come," the lady told me, making me smile. As I was petting Buddy, the lady exclaimed, "Oh, I bought something new today," and rushed inside the house. She came back with something in a plastic bag and asked, "Mason, do you want to give Buddy a treat?" I nodded, took the treat from her, and gave it to Buddy. "Lucky you, Buddy, getting treats. When I was in daycare, I missed snack time," I said to Buddy as he happily munched on his treat. I was just voicing my thoughts at the time. But now I understand. Perhaps the lady sensed something then. That's it. I'm good at baking cookies. I'm planning to make some tomorrow, so if you'd like, come over, Mason. Let's eat them with Buddy," she offered. The next day, eager with anticipation, I ran to the lady's house as soon as school ended. "I've been waiting for you." I was greeted by the smiling faces of the lady and Buddy. On a small table in the garden, there were lots of cookies in different shapes. "Here, these are your cookies, Mason," she said, and Buddy whimpered, looking eager. "Oh, Buddy's treats are over here. Let's all eat together." The lady had also prepared homemade apple juice. "They look so yummy, thank you." At the moment I tried a star-shaped cookie, a wave of sweetness flooded my mouth. "This is delicious. It's the first time I've had such tasty cookies," I exclaimed cheerfully. The lady smiled, saying, "I'm glad you like them," but tears were streaming down her face. Surprised, I asked, "What's wrong?" but she just shook her head, wiping her tears. A bit later, The lady said, "I'm sorry for crying," and explained why she had been crying. She once had a child who had passed away as a baby. If the child had been alive, he would have been about my age. Just thinking about it made her cry, she explained. "There's been a lot of sadness in your life, too." I managed to say, "I've had my share of sadness, too, but I want to live happily with my mom someday. I'll grow up fast and work to support her because she's working so hard right now. I want to earn a lot of money when I got a job. I'm wondering how I can do that." I found myself saying what I was thinking, probably because she told me what was on her mind. Despite my sudden outburst, the lady seriously considered my question. "Well, until you grow up, the best thing you can do is study hard. By doing that, when you get older, you'll have a lot of job options to choose from. From there, you can find a job that pays well. But remember, it's important to find a job you love. That's crucial," she advised. From that day on, I worked hard at my studies. When I faced a difficult problem at homework, the lady always helped me. I would peek into her garden every day, and if she was there, I'd drop by. For me, who had no friends, spending time with a lady and buddy was a great joy, but that warm time didn't last forever. One night, while studying at home and waiting for my mom, the phone rang. The calls I usually get at night are only from my mom saying, "I'm on my way home," but that day, the call came earlier than usual. Curious, I answered the phone. It was from a woman I didn't know. After confirming my name, she said, "Stay home, I'll be there soon," and hung up before I could reply. Soon after, the woman from the call arrived. She worked with my mom. But what she said next left me in disbelief. "Your mom has collapsed. Let's go to the hospital together." With that woman, I headed to the hospital. Arriving at the hospital and sitting on a long bench in the waiting area, a doctor came out of the treatment room. "Where's Mom?" When I asked, the doctor squatted down to make eye contact and said, "It seems your mom has collapsed from exhaustion. She must have worked very hard, so let's let her rest quietly for now." That's what he said. He didn't say it in so many words, but I somehow understood what it meant at that moment. My mother had passed away from overwork. After that, I was taken by strangers and put into temporary care. A few days later, people claiming to be my grandparents appeared. They were strangers to me because I had never met them before. I don't know how they were contacted, but it seemed there had been some estrangement between them and my mom. "We are your mom's parents. Let's live together at our place from now on." The person claiming to be my grandfather said this with a bright smile. Though I was scared to suddenly live with strangers, I, who understood nothing, could only nod in agreement. After my mother's funeral, the day to move came. My grandparents and I were moving boxes into the car. "It's time to say goodbye to this place." That's when I suddenly remembered the lady and buddy. I have to say goodbye properly. "Grandpa, please wait, just a moment." I ran as fast as I could to the lady's house, gasping for breath. "Hello, I'm here," I shouted as loudly as I ever had. The lady was inside but came out in a hurry when she heard my shouting. I told her about my mother's passing and that I had to go live with my grandparents now. "Take care." Crying, I petted Buddy's head one last time. Buddy licked my tears, and the lady cried with me. The lady kept rubbing my back, repeating, "Stay strong, be well," over and over. After saying goodbye to the lady and Buddy, I went to live with my grandparents. The journey to my grandparents' house felt incredibly long, but it was actually about an hour's drive from where we had lived. From then on, I lived with my grandparents, who were incredibly kind, and never once did I see them angry. They bought me toys and games, ensuring I lived a life without want. However, the shock of losing my mother and the difficulty in adjusting to a new school made me withdraw for a while. I spent most of my time shut in my room, but one day my grandmother brought me cookies in a box that she had received from a neighbor. Eating the cookies with my grandmother reminded me of the cookies the lady used to bake. Can I make cookies too? With that thought, I used my allowance from my grandmother to buy cookie ingredients. From that day, I began baking sweets. My grandparents were relieved to see me enjoying baking and let me do as I wished. I progressed through middle and high school and then went on to vocational school. My grandparents were always there to support me. Fully aware that my education wasn't free, I studied hard and graduated top of my class from vocational school. After graduation, I started working at a cake shop, gaining experience as a pastry chef. After working for several years, my grandparents passed away. For many years, I was alone until I formed a bond with Lily, who was 11 years younger and worked at the shop, leading to our marriage. Despite our age difference, which often surprises people, she's very mature and a wonderful wife. With my marriage as a turning point and having always wanted to own my shop, I decided to become independent. It's a small shop, but I opened a pastry shop with a cafe. This shop, started by my wife and me, has a special focus. When I chose the location for the shop, by chance, which is placed on a street with kindergartens and nurseries. Initially, I planned to open a regular pastry shop, but choosing that location sparked a new inspiration in me. Let's make sweets that even kids find delicious. It's not uncommon for young children to have allergies to eggs or milk. Therefore, in addition to making regular cakes, I also created cakes and cookies without using eggs or milk. The items we sell include strawberry sponge cakes, chocolate cakes, tarts, roll cakes, and cookies. The selection is limited and simple, but having egg-free and milk-free options quickly spread by word of mouth, and we became known as a delicious cake shop where children could also enjoy treats. Many parents and their children stop by after picking up their kids from kindergarten or nursery. On occasion, we are requested to provide birthday cakes that do not contain eggs or milk. As a little service, we also have individually wrapped cookies at the register for kids to pick and take home with them. I'm glad we set up shop here. The bright smiles of the children always give me energy. Having my own shop, a family to protect, and living a normal life was something I could never have imagined back then. Reflecting on those times, I couldn't have pictured this, but I want to cherish the happiness I feel now as I live each day. One day, my mother-in-law asked me for a favor. On a day when the shop was closed, she wanted help cleaning up her childhood home, which had been left untouched for many years. Since her parents had passed away, the house had been left as is, but now, she planned to sell the land. Before handing it over to the real estate agent, she wanted to clean up the inside of the house. On a day when both our days off coincided, the three of us went to her childhood home. But there, something astonishing happened. I found myself stopping in my tracks in front of the garden. The familiar garden, a lone doghouse, and as I matched it with my memories, I found myself inside the house. On a small shelf, there was a photo of a dog and the name Buddy. I might have been here when I was a kid, I muttered. When I murmured that, both of them tilted their heads and went, huh? That's when I shared my past experiences. After hearing the whole story, she, with her hand over her mouth, said, "That story is true, isn't it?" "No way," I couldn't believe it, and started recalling her memories. Turns out, my mother-in-law was a kind lady from my childhood. She is currently a preschool principal, and it seems that her decision to pursue this career was influenced by me. Back then, the lady didn't have children, but after I was taken in by my grandparents, she became pregnant. During her parenting years, she often thought of me. Originally a child care worker, she always wondered if there was something she could do for children like me. So, When her child-rearing days calmed down, she built a small-scale children's center on the land she inherited from her parents, offering not just daycare but also support for families in need. "Because I met you, I'm now a principal," she said. "If that's the case," I said, and then I told her. "The reason I run a pastry shop today is all because of the homemade cookies you gave me. Being able to chase my dream and marry Lily is all thanks to your kindness. Thanks to you, I became a decent man." Hearing this, both Lily and her mother burst into laughter, perhaps finding it funny that I called myself decent. I had no idea that I had met her a long time ago. "But how come neither of you recognized each other?" Lily asked, puzzled. Immediately, she responded, "Well, it was a story from over 30 years ago. But really, it's strange. Even though you got married and lived so close, I never realized. We both changed too much to recognize each other, and we all laughed together at the absurdity." One day, with a serious expression, my wife said, "I have something to discuss with you." Curious, I asked what was on her mind. "I've been thinking if there's something I can do too." She shared her thoughts. Hearing about how her mother and I met, Lily wanted to do something for the community and the children as well. She had volunteered during her student days and had always wanted to contribute in some way when she could. She proposed an idea, suggesting we work on it together if it wouldn't be too much trouble. I agreed to her proposal. A few times a year, holidays and our shop's regular days off coincide. We decided to start a family baking workshop during these days. Since the shop was too small, we used the children's center. The plan involves enjoying the decoration of cakes and cookies without using any fire. I want to continue innovating within our capabilities, but I also plan to keep going as we have been. My wife and I share the sentiment. Here's to seeing even more sparkling smiles from parents and children in the future. Do you think you've become some kind of superhero? Emerging from the shadows, Chris sneered as he looked down on us, flustered. Beside me, Sherry, surrounded by 5 gang members, was trembling in fear. The leader of gang encircling Sherry and me was Trevor. Breathing heavily, Trevor was loudly laying down the law. However, the moment he heard my name, Trevor suddenly changed his demeanor. Confused by Trevor's unexpected reaction, Chris raised his voice, attempting to incite an attack on us. But irritated by Chris, Trevor turned his back on us and glared at Chris, who was arrogantly standing behind. Unaware of my relationship with Trevor, Chris must have thought he could use the gang to harass me. And because of this, Chris, who had overstepped his bounds, ended up cornering himself into a dire situation. My name is David. This year, at 36, I have a somewhat unusual background. During my student years, convinced I had no allies, I clashed with others daily. Though sometimes mocked for my height, no one could match up to me, the strongest. Of course, I've had some trouble with the law. Only the police officer, Kevin, genuinely worried about me. You need to be kinder to people now that you're an adult. Kevin always looked out for me, calming me down whenever I caused trouble. It was Kevin who introduced me to the military, a path I had never considered during my uncertain future. After enlisting, confident in my physical abilities, I was recognized by my superiors and underwent special training and various experiences. Reevaluating my life, I worked hard to study, something I had never done before, hoping to be of some use to others. Years later, having risen to a position where I was in charge of a unit, I was assigned to a special forces team. Longing for a normal life after completing numerous missions, I retired from the special forces and took a job at a regular company. The company I joined was a small foreign trade firm, dealing directly with international transactions and mainly mediating between companies. Occasionally, I have to deal with individuals who can show their faces in broad daylight, which is why Mr. Thompson, president of my company, knowing my background, hired me also as a bodyguard. Never a fan of formalities, I found the daily routine of wearing a suit and working on a computer ill-suited to me. Yet, this mundane daily life felt fulfilling in its own way. I had no complaints about my job, except for one unbearable aspect. It was Chris, my younger, taller boss. Boasting about his prestigious university degree, he looked down on me as a high school graduate from the lower ranks. Chris's attitude was infuriating. "Hey, you're a high school grad, right? It's amazing you got into this company, and at your age, it must have been your first job, huh? Must have been living a worthless life until now, right?" Indeed, I am a high school graduate. But having served in the military and special forces, I pride myself on a rich life experience that is unmatched. Enduring Chris's endless and impressive college tales is an unbearable torment. Not going to college definitely means you've missed out on life, but I guess someone who's only experienced the bottom of the barrel like you can't even imagine that. I couldn't accept that such a worthless man was managing a team as a boss. Sherry, my direct supervisor and the senior manager, always laughed off Chris's pompous behavior and irritation towards me. "Don't worry about it. We just need to do our job." Feeling a familiar kindness in Sherry, I was surprised to find she was the daughter of my mentor, Kevin. While talking about Kevin, Chris, looking displeased, slammed my desk hard. "Having fun with my Sherry, even though you're just a high school grad. You are 10 years too early for that." An irritated Chris dumped a mountain of work on me and left. Then, Sherry looked at me worriedly. "Is this okay?" "It's a lot, but compared to the operations in the special forces, this is nothing. Handling paperwork is not a big deal." However, having spent over a decade in the isolated world of special forces, I lacked the manners and rules of a civilian. Without Sherry's support, I couldn't even properly set up meetings for outside sales. Sherry, though higher in position, is much younger in age. Her gestures of gently calming me, so obviously reminiscent of a parent-child relationship, felt nostalgically familiar. And every time Sherry joined me on outside visits, Chris would glare at me with jealous rage, grinding his teeth. It was obvious to anyone who saw it, Chris had set his sights on Sherry. Indeed, Sherry, with her beautiful looks and bright personality, was well regarded by the staff and an incredibly attractive woman. Sherry, uncomfortable with his advances, tried to keep her distance, but Chris, undeterred, would seize any opportunity to approach her and invite it. "Sherry, I found a great place. Let's go out for dinner, just the two of us tonight." Unable to bear it any longer, I grabbed Chris's hand as he attempted to touch a distressed Sherry. "Ouch, what are you doing? Can't you see Sherry is troubled? And lately, touching a woman without consent is a big issue, isn't it? Do you even know who you're talking to? Unlike bottom-ring employees like you, I'm a manager." Chris boasted arrogantly, as if his position as a manager justified his behavior. To me, it didn't matter what position he held. Sherry was the daughter of my mentor, and if she was in trouble, it was only right to help her. Chris tried to shake off my hand and landed a strong punch to my stomach, but such an attack hardly made an impact on my trained body. I feigned pain to appease him, and Chris sneered at me triumphantly. "Humph, I'll let it go for today. Just don't ever get in the way of me and Sherry." He left in a good mood that time. But to protect Sherry, I continued to interfere with Chris's tyranny time and again. Then, one day, I was suddenly summoned by the department head, Alex. It seemed Chris had been feeding Alex all sorts of stories. Although I couldn't agree with being reprimanded, I kept apologizing. Unlike Sherry, who came to console me after the lecture, Chris came to gloat. "After all, a useless person like you is just dead weight to the company. Just quit already." Causing trouble here would only burden Sherry and Mr. Thompson, who had hired me. As much as I wanted to retaliate, I had no choice but to let Chris's insults slide. However, as I continued to intervene to keep Chris away from Sherry, my desk began to pile up with work he dumped on me daily. The volume of work kept increasing over time, and soon I was buried in so much busy work that I couldn't even make the last train home, let alone leave on time. I'm making a useful employee out of a bottom rung like you. Be grateful. Sherry, worried about me, offered her help, but before we knew it, it was past midnight. Seeing the time, Sherry suddenly smiled at me. It's too late now, can't be helped. Let's grab some dinner and then take a taxi home. I couldn't refuse Sherry's invitation, nor could I let her go home alone. All right, as a thank you for helping me with the work, dinner's on me tonight. Sherry's childlike expression of joy, a stark contrast to her usual beauty, felt incredibly endearing. The pleasant time flew by quickly, and I left Sherry in front of the restaurant to look for a taxi on the main street. Just as a taxi pulled up, I heard Sherry scream. Rushing back, I found Sherry surrounded by 5 large men. What are you guys doing? We'll deal with the guy later. Miss, would you come with us? As I brushed off the man's hand that was grabbing Sherry, he glared at me with a demonic expression. Hey, who do you think you are? Don't you know me? I'm Trevor, the gang leader around here. The gang Trevor claimed to be a part of was one that Mr. Thompson had warned me about. And Trevor was their young leader. His large build and sharp eyes would make any ordinary person want to flee immediately. But no matter who the opponent was, I couldn't back down. It doesn't matter who you are. If you lay a hand on her, I won't hold back. Facing Trevor's ire, his fist flew towards me with resolve. I thought I could handle the attack, but it was tough to bear after several hits. Seizing a moment's gap, I grabbed Sherry's hand, attempting to escape from the situation. But there were 5 of them. They weren't going to let us escape that easily. Cut off from any escape, I was deflecting the attacks from Trevor and his gang when a familiar voice echoed from the shadows of a building. What are you doing? Hurry up and finish him off. Emerging from hiding was none other than Chris. Standing before us, Chris arrogantly started spouting selfish remarks. Hey, you think you're some kind of hero. You're no match for Trevor and his crew. Stay away from my Sherry. Chris, convinced of his absolute superiority, looked down on me with a smug grin. Facing 5 opponents, I had no way out, and even I couldn't protect Sherry under these circumstances. Sherry, paralyzed with fear, trembled and couldn't move. In this dire situation, I racked my brain for a solution but came up empty, falling right into Chris's trap. However, upon closer inspection, Trevor's face looked familiar. Wondering if it could be him, I introduced myself. Could you be Trevor? I am Trevor. What do you mean by could you be? Do you think you'll be allowed to act like that? Irritated by my words, Trevor frowned and glared at me condescendingly. Do you recognize me? I'm David. Right after I introduced myself, Trevor's eyes widened and his face turned pale. Then, in a panic, Trevor started apologizing profusely, despite being in the middle of the road. Wait, you're David. I'm terribly sorry for my ignorance and disrespect. Hey, you all apologize too, now. Shaken by Trevor's sudden erratic behavior, the rest of the group hastily apologized to me. Sherry, stunned by Trevor's bizarre actions, managed to stop trembling from the shock. And above Chris's astonished face floated numerous question marks. David, what on earth are you? Dumbfounded by Trevor's repeated apologies, Sherry looked back and forth between me and Trevor. Losing patience with Trevor and his crew's inexplicable fear, Chris started yelling and berating them. Trevor, what are you doing? Hurry up and teach this guy a lesson. Shut up. Do you even know who this man is? David here used to lead the gang that ran this area, and I owe him a lot. Someone like you has no right to speak lightly of him. Before meeting Kevin, I used to vent my frustrations and cause trouble, and that's when I met Trevor. Trevor suddenly came to me, who was undefeated at the time, wanting to be my disciple. Initially reluctant, I eventually started taking care of Trevor, who would always follow me around. This odd relationship with Trevor somewhat changed something in me. I never expected to reunite in such a manner. Trevor kept apologizing to me. Confused by Trevor's turnabout, Chris still ordered them to attack me and Sherry. Who cares about the past? You said you'd listen to me, so do it now. Despite Chris's harsh words, Trevor defiantly glared back at him. Unable to comprehend Trevor's actions, Chris looked flustered, absent-mindedly scratching his head. Suddenly stopping, he pulled something from his jacket's inner pocket. Holding something shiny and sharp, Chris screamed and lunged at me. Easily dodging Chris's attack, I grabbed his hand and knocked the dangerous object to the ground. What are you even doing? Stay away from my Sherry. Trevor, you're useless to me. Enraged and turning red, Chris hurled insults at Trevor and his crew. But Trevor and his crew remained unfazed by Chris's words. Letting go of his arm, Chris stumbled and fell to the ground. Getting up while grimacing, Chris glared at me fiercely. Remember this, you'll pay for defying me, the manager. Looking around in panic, Chris continued to loudly insult me and Trevor's crew. Then, holding his arm in pain, he fled the scene. Sherry, having witnessed everything, looked at me with a face that couldn't hide her astonishment. I didn't want Sherry to know, but in this situation, I had no choice but to explain. Taking a deep breath, I slowly shared my past with Sherry. Truth be told, I didn't always live a life I could be proud of in the past. It was during such times that I met your father. As I shared the story of how I met Kevin, Sherry's face lit up with understanding and relief. Confused by her unexpected reaction, Sherry began to speak with a joyful smile. So it was you. I heard stories from my father, and I'm glad to see you're just as kind and straightforward as I imagined. It seems Sherry had heard about me directly from Kevin himself. Despite the trouble I had caused, learning that Kevin had spoken fondly of me made me feel somewhat bashful. As Sherry and I shared this indescribable moment, Trevor approached apologetically. David, I truly apologize for today. You've become a fine adult, different from before. I'm impressed all over again. Trevor's subordinates, confused by his reaction, kept their distance, watching the situation unfold. They must be wary of me, now a mysterious figure to whom Trevor has apologized. David, let me make it up to you by driving you home, and please, miss, join us as well. Gratefully accepting Trevor's offer, I got into the car he guided us to. As I relaxed, thinking this was a moment to catch my breath, Sherry looked at me with sparkling eyes. David, I don't know the details, but you were in some incredible places, weren't you? Do you have amazing muscles or something? Even after retiring, I haven't skipped my daily training routines. With a body fat percentage of 5%, my physique, maintained through consistent training and exercise, even after my special forces days, is indeed extraordinary. Sherry's fascination with muscles seemed to erase any fear she had from being attacked earlier. Though the conversation took an unexpected turn, I was relieved to see Sherry's spirits lifted. After ensuring Sherry's safe return home, Trevor also drove me to my place. As we were about to part ways, Trevor stepped out of the car to speak to me. David, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. And about that Chris, it seems he holds quite a grudge against you. The information Trevor shared about Chris was astonishing. But now, I had proof that Chris couldn't boast about being a manager anymore. The next day, I was greeted by a visibly irate Chris as I arrived at work. Immediately upon seeing me, He grabbed my suit and looked down at me with a glare. Chris began to boast about his past, as if trying to intimidate me. Yesterday was just a mistake, right? I mean, I was part of a bad gang back in high school. There's no way I'd be scared of someone like you. It seems Chris met Trevor through a senior's introduction during their college years, but from the way Chris refers to him, they don't seem to be on equal footing. More likely, Chris was somewhat of an underling to Trevor. Despite this, Chris boasts about having Trevor as his protector, looking down on me with a complacent smile. Fed up with Chris's attitude, I shrugged off his grip and made a call, leaving my phone on speaker. "Trevor, are you available right now?" "Yes, always happy to hear from you, David." Chris, taken aback by Trevor's unusual tone, froze with wide eyes. He hadn't expected me to call Trevor. Ignoring the distant Chris, I continued the conversation. "About what happened yesterday, that was all true, right?" "Yes, Chris was the one who paid us to attack you and your friends. His reckless behavior, pretending to be a gang leader, has been quite a nuisance." Chris, panicked by Trevor's statement, tried to end the call immediately, but several employees had already arrived at the office. He found himself under the cold, disdainful gazes of those around him. "This is a lie. I don't know anything about this. David must be forcing him to say these things." As Trevor continued to expose Chris's actions, Chris turned pale, covered his ears, and collapsed to his knees. Trevor was furious at being called a liar, and he berated Chris over the phone. Upon hearing the commotion, Mr. Thompson appeared. After learning of Chris's misdeeds from nearby employees, Mr. Thompson sighed deeply and looked at Chris with disdain. "Chris, is this true?" "Well, this is, As Chris tried to mumble an excuse, Mr. Thompson pressed him for an answer. Resigned, Chris, his face gone from pale to white, apologized to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, looking weary, addressed Chris, who was barely able to voice his apology. "You're apologizing to the wrong person, aren't you?" I understand. David, I'm sorry." Chris, seemingly still not fully convinced he should apologize to me, swallowed his pride and offered an apology. Not only did Chris's scheme fall through, but he was also stripped of his managerial position on the spot by Mr. Thompson. Moreover, surprisingly, Chris was demoted all the way down to a regular employee, possibly due to Mr. Thompson's decisive action. Days after the apology incident, Chris, having finally realized his unwarranted behavior, completely stopped his unreasonable demands and arrogant attitude towards his juniors. However, for some reason, whenever Chris caught my eye, he would stop, back away, and flee. It was rare for Chris to initiate a conversation, but that day, he approached me with a nervous yet somehow smug expression, reminiscent of the old times. "David, you're a high school graduate, right? Can you speak French?" It seemed Chris had received a call from a client I was in charge of, who could only communicate in French. Chris probably assumed that, because I was a high school graduate, I wouldn't be able to handle communication or consultations in French. However, thanks to my diligent studies before joining the Special Forces, I could easily speak French, so there was no issue. After smoothly concluding the discussion with the client, the surrounding employees looked at me with admiration, leaving Chris dumbfounded. Speaking French was nothing out of the ordinary for someone with my Special Forces background, but it seemed to have taken everyone else by surprise. Isn't this normal? No. Did I do something strange again? For me, who had spent a significant amount of time abroad, such skills were to be expected. Apparently, Chris, who had always boasted about his education and acted superior, was known among the employees as an incompetent college graduate due to his lack of French proficiency. Indeed, Chris's attempt at speaking French over the phone was barely coherent. I managed to understand only that he desperately wanted me to take over the call. as my reputation significantly improved. Chris, once a manager and a college graduate, was now labeled useless, drawing disappointed looks. Employees who had once been looked down upon by Chris now chuckled at his complete loss of dignity. Humiliated, Chris returned to his desk, holding his head in his hands. From then on, cases requiring French communication were almost always directed to me. Although it happened occasionally, Chris would revert to his arrogant behavior towards juniors only when I wasn't around. However, no employee would listen to the commands of the inept former manager who couldn't speak French, and not a single person entertained Chris's demands or unreasonable requests anymore. One day, upon returning from an external visit, I caught Chris unsuccessfully hitting on a new female employee. This isn't what it looks like," she insisted, and I had no choice. "It's not my fault." Chris's excuses sounded nothing more than childish whining. Deeming his words unworthy of response, I whispered to him, "I'm still in touch with Trevor. That's why there haven't been any recent troubles with that group. Trevor and his subordinates have been keeping an eye on you, Chris." Chris collapsed on the spot, shaking slightly as he stared off into the distance, all strength drained from his body. Afterward, Chris stopped his arrogant behavior and occasionally was even seen praising others. He must have changed his heart and reformed his ways. Still, he continues to glance my way, gauging my reactions. Every time our eyes meet, his face contorts and he breaks into a cold sweat. Years have passed since I started working at this company, and although Sherry has since married and left, I was promoted to manager. And now, Chris is the chief. He has completely changed his ways and become considerate of those around him. Chris has become a dependable member of my team. Having met Kevin and seen people like Chris come to realize their mistakes, I've grown to believe that the world could be a better place if more people did the same. Having witnessed the darker side of humanity during my time in the Special Forces, my modest dream is for human conflicts to cease. It might seem naive for someone my age, but Kevin and Sherry always took my fanciful ideas seriously. I continue to maintain a friendly relationship with Kevin's family. While I may not be capable of much, if I can change even a few people's perspectives from looking down on others, I'll have made good use of my experiences.